This is the Black Information Network Daily Podcast, and I'm your host, Ramses Ja. And sometimes the amount of stories that make their way to us means that we simply can't cover everything that comes our way. But from time to time, a story just stays with me, and I feel compelled to share it with you and give you my thoughts. And now, one more thing. Okay, so if you are interested in democracy, or you have a lot of free time, or if you just can't get enough of political news, there's a good chance that you watch the presidential debate. But if you have a busy life, or you are kind of overwhelmed or exhausted by all of these things, then you may have missed it. And of course, around here, we have to watch these things. And I had a few extra thoughts that I'd like to add, but I'm going to fill in some gaps for those of you that may have missed it. And then, of course, we're going to recall some events for those who saw it. So before the debate came on, obviously, I knew it was coming all day, so I'd planned my day around it, but I was texting a friend of mine, and she is a politically engaged individual, and she was driving. And so I felt like she might miss it, and sure enough, it comes on, and I'm still texting her, and she's like, "Oh my God, he sounds sick." And I knew instantly that she was listening to the debate on the radio, because there was no two ways about it. You know, he came out, and I was expecting that State of the Union Joe Biden, but he came out and his voice was very low, you know, kind of the quivery old man voice that we see when the cameras are on, when he's being recorded, when he's doing his public speaking events or whatever. And again, I was really excited to see the dark Brandon, you know, the pumped up, you know, president, you know, that would calm the fears that he's too old, too elderly to be in office. But yeah, he sounded sick, and his clearing his voice didn't help. And then, of course, throughout the debate, he, you know, you could tell his stammer was kind of creeping in here and there. He handled it well, but they weren't doing him any favors on a stage with Donald Trump. The truth is, it made him look more feeble. Whereas Trump sounded powerful. He sounded in control. He sounded factually wrong. And he sounded like he was dodging lots of questions. We'll get to that in a second. But in terms of his delivery, you know, that's just what was on full display. And for those that watched it, of course, I'm not telling you anything new. Indeed, Trump's attacks on Joe Biden, they sounded powerful. Again, I'm not talking about their merit. I'm not talking about whether or not they were founded. They just sounded like powerful attacks. And, you know, when they have the side-by-side of the two debaters, you know, with Joe Biden, you know, with the kind of slack-jawed look, and Donald Trump just kind of asserting all of this nonsense. Again, most people don't know what's nonsense and what isn't. So they just hear the temperament. And, you know, it's another one for Trump there. Now, for those of us in the know, we know that Trump has a tendency to exaggerate. And that was on full display during the debate. He was saying things like, you know, Roe v. Wade. You know, everyone wanted the decision to go back to the states, which we know wasn't true. And President Biden made a great point saying Roe v. Wade was the law of the land for over 50 years. And it wasn't until you overturned it that things became imbalanced, right? So again, Trump's statements that, you know, everyone wanted Roe to fall back to the states, it's just exaggerated. It's not based in a shared reality. But indeed, the way that he said it, the way he delivered the message, that has to resonate with Trump supporters and maybe even some independents who are looking for a strong leader. And that's the scary part. Recently, Q and I had a conversation regarding the Kendrick and Drake beef back and forth. And he shared a piece of advice that he came across that said, listen, we either have to believe that both of them are telling the truth, or we have to believe that nobody's telling the truth. But you can't pick and choose what's factual and put it together, because there's so much stuff that is not knowable by a single person. Now, this is not a direct translation for a presidential debate, because of course you can pick and choose what's factual and what's not, and what's exaggerated and what's understated. Absolutely you can. But for most Americans, they won't go that far. They will either assume everything is true or everything is a lie. And if you're doing that, it's good to appear like the more dominant individual. And Joe Biden, he seemed like a more collected leader. He seemed like a more measured leader. But for folks who are looking for a powerful leader, Trump's going to be their guy. There's no two ways about it. I'm not a Trump person. I would never vote for Donald Trump. And I've shared on the show, after Biden's comments on Palestine, it doesn't feel like, Joe Biden is winning me back over either. But, I have to cast a vote because someone will be president. And as I stated, I would never in a million years ever vote for Donald Trump. But with that said, again, for folks who are looking for someone who is strong, a strong leader, comparing the two, Donald Trump certainly appeared a stronger speaker, at least, than Joe Biden. He fit more words into his time than Biden, which again was a display of energy, of faculties, cognitive abilities, etc. And that's not to say that Joe Biden was not capable. It's just that in terms of the display, Trump was on 10. And it really seemed like Trump did a lot of stoking of fears, and Biden just kind of responded to them. Trump was a lot more on the offensive, and it was refreshing when Biden took the offensive, but Trump was certainly more on the offensive, and we saw a lot of Biden just kind of responding to it, which was strange because there's so much more to attack in Donald Trump's ecosystem. And again, to be fair, Biden did let go some haymakers, a couple of really good ones, and he brought the receipts, And on top of that, Trump was dodging questions throughout the whole debate. He dodged the January 6th question. He dodged the climate question. He almost never answered the questions and had to be reminded every time of what the original question was. They'd be like, hey, former President Trump, is the sun yellow? And he'd be like, yeah, well, I've been thinking a lot about the sun and the moon, and, there's all these planets and stars and blah, blah, and just go way off topic. And then he'd have 30 seconds left and they'd be like, yeah, so is the sun yellow, right? Now, of course, that wasn't a question, but just to give you an idea. And this is kind of Trump. He's not really the most organized individual. Whereas Joe Biden, he was on topic. He stayed on topic. He, as reasonably a person can, it's about what we would expect. But again, to people who need a showman, Donald Trump was the showman. There's no two ways about that. There were other questions that Donald Trump was dodging. Would you respect the results of the election? And I think they had to ask that a third time before Donald Trump finally answered it. And what I think is that for intelligent people, it's almost impossible to follow Trump. It's almost impossible. You'd have a tough time arguing with me for that one, just because he's just not a linear speaker. He's a powerful speaker. He makes a lot of assertions that he just pulls from thin air, and he says it with such confidence that folks who wouldn't call themselves intelligent can easily be confused into thinking that he is intelligent. But he's just making up stuff as he goes, and he's just overly confident, right? And then on the other side of that, we're looking for the same level of enthusiasm, the same level of inspiration from Joe Biden. And his age is showing. I got to tell you the truth, and his age is showing, and, you can make an argument that if the worst happens, that Kamala Harris is there, and that's still not Joe Biden. So, we let the rest of the cards fall where they will. But again, I'm not as concerned about Joe Biden as I am concerned about Donald Trump and Project 2025. But for folks who are looking for a strong display, the Trump fans, it was all there. Another thing, Trump made everything about Mexico and about the border. And we talked about that on this show. We talked about Biden trying to get his border bill passed and the border bill being tanked, so that, and it was behind, Donald Trump was behind. I'm not sure if it was the House or the Senate, but Donald Trump was behind the tanking of that border bill, because he wanted to campaign on Joe Biden having a weak border. And Joe Biden has put the effort in to try to strengthen the border, and he didn't go into detail there. And Donald Trump was able to play that card during the debate. He was able to say that, Joe Biden has a weak border. Millions of people are crossing over. They brought up the story about the little girl that was raped and murdered, and that he went to her funeral. Joe Biden went to her funeral. And then everything, the opioids and almost everything, Trump connected to the border. You know what I mean? And that's a source of fear for a lot of people who feel like they're losing their country, that there's an invasion, that, Joe Biden is letting people in so he can have more voters, or whatever his case is. And Trump went on to say that the immigrants are taking away black jobs. And I remember thinking to myself, like, what's a black job? I didn't really get that. But the long and the short of it is that Joe Biden was what we expected, and Donald Trump was what we expected. Joe Biden is qualified to do the job that he's doing. He's aged. No one's pretending that he's not. He's slowed down a bit. No one's pretending that he's not. But he's still doing the job. And if he has another 4 years, our belief is that he will still continue to do the job. If he's no longer able, there's another person, again, waiting in the wings, who is not Donald Trump. And of course, Donald Trump came to the debate being Donald Trump. Nonsensical answers. And some of them made sense, and he was making his points. I don't agree with his points, but he was making his points. And a lot of it was just unfounded, baseless, just grasping at whatever's in the air, and nonsensical to, again, folks who are looking to follow his reason, his logic. And when he doesn't stick the landing, which he rarely does, we're left wondering, like, okay, so what were we just listening to? Even the moderators were like, okay, so we asked you about opioids. So you're talking about Ukraine. We asked you about opioids. Can you answer that question? So Donald Trump showed up as Donald Trump. Joe Biden showed up as Joe Biden. What are you going to do? Now, I recognize that sounds pretty bleak. And it is. We have two people that are, in a lot of people's opinions, neither of them are qualified to be the president of the United States, but this is what we have, and one of them is going to be president, and that's the way that it's going to go. There's no two ways about the outcome. So, for folks who are not looking forward to another Trump presidency, there's a couple of bright moments. Biden did go on the offensive at some point. He called Trump a sucker and a loser, and then he brought a couple of receipts to that. He talked about getting money to HBCUs. This was Biden talking about getting money to HBCUs, and I remember covering that. That was pretty cool. He mentioned that, Trump had an affair with a porn star while his wife was pregnant, and he had the morals of an alley cat. So that was an offensive that landed. And of course, Donald Trump tried to deny that, but folks that have known Donald Trump long before he became the president, known him as the playboy. Like, he played up that part of his persona for many years. And he was accused of rape going all the way back to the 70s and molestation and sexual misconduct. So that it's not a stretch to, Donald Trump paid for a porn star, but Donald Trump denied it. I have to tell you that. Joe Biden also mentioned that 40 of his 44 former cabinet members are not endorsing him. So I think that is very telling, that the people that work closest with Donald Trump would not like to see him back in the White House. He talked about what Donald Trump was doing on January 6th. They spent some time talking about that. And, Donald Trump was being very slippery with the accountability and the questions, but Joe Biden landed a solid blow. He brought up the fact that he's like, your own staff, your own advisors were sitting around as you watch Fox News, begging you to do something for 3 hours while your supporters attack the Capitol. And now you want to let them out back onto the streets. They need to be held accountable for their actions. And I thought that was a potent line as well. And of course, he mentioned, that his supporters were there to hang Mike Pence and all kinds of other stuff. So long and the short of it, again, is that Trump came as Trump and Biden came as Biden. Those are our choices, and we have to decide what we're going to do about it. I watched the whole debate with kind of like a knot in my stomach, and I know Q was doing the same because he was texting me. My friend I was texting earlier, she was texting me the same thing. And we're grateful that there were no senior moments on Joe Biden's part. We're grateful that, these two had a debate, and we can see an hour and a half worth of them going back and forth. That shows stamina on Joe Biden's part. And we got a chance to see that, Donald Trump, he admitted that he deregulated a lot of industries. Remember all those trains jumping off the tracks? I used to work with the CDC. Donald Trump defunded and deregulated the CDC, which is how we ended up getting COVID in the first place. There was a commission at the CDC that was put together to keep us safe from pandemics and epidemics. And Donald Trump disbanded that. And, these regulations are in place for a reason. But Donald Trump is so pro-business that it almost comes across as anti-human being, anti-planet. And again, we got to see him admit to all of these things on a stage. So again, for those of us that are kind of like intimately in the know, he didn't run from any of that. He couldn't run from any of it. Slippery as he is. But for those who are not in the know, I worry that they might have seen what they believe to be a powerful man, although he was kind of spewing a bunch of baseless nonsense that will ultimately result in a better country for the rich people and a more challenging country for those of us who want a more equitable go at the American dream. Now, as always, you're free to disagree with me. I suspect some of you will, and I welcome that because, we all grow when we have conversations like this. And of course, if you have something to add, do so at the Red Microphone Talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app or on my social media. You can find me at Ramses Ja on all platforms. I will talk to you soon, and until I do, peace. This has been a production of the Black Information Network. Today's show is produced by Chris Thompson. Have some thoughts you'd like to share? Use the Red Microphone Talkback feature on the iHeartRadio app. While you're there, be sure to hit subscribe and download all of our episodes. I am your host, Ramses Ja on all social media. Join us tomorrow as we share our news with our voice, from our perspective, right here on the Black Information Network Daily Podcast.